Step 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Exact, not approximated in any way. Precise. Nature, the inborn or hereditary characteristics as an influence on or determinant of personality. All of AA's 12 steps asks us to go contrary to our natural desires. They all deflate our egos. When it comes to ego deflation, few steps are harder to take than 5. But scarcely any step is more necessary to long-time sobriety and peace of mind than this one. Your AA experience so far has taught you that you cannot live alone with your pressing problems and the character defects that cause or aggravate them. You have to talk to somebody about them. If you have swept the searchlight of step 4 back and forth over your career, it has revealed in stark relief those experiences that you'd rather not remember. You have come to know how wrong thinking and action have hurt you and others. Though you may be feeling intense fear and reluctance to do this, there are many benefits to be gained from step 5. The best reason first, if you skip this vital step, you may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives, trying to avoid this humbling experience. They have turned to easier methods and almost invariably got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wonder why they fell. They took inventory, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense that the AA program demands, until they told someone else all of their life story. Another reason is that you shall get rid of the terrible sense of isolation you've always had. Almost without exception, alcoholics are tortured by loneliness. Even before our drinking got bad, nearly all of us suffered the feeling that we didn't quite belong. Either we were shy or apt to be noisy, good people craving attention and companionship, but never getting it, at least to our way of thinking. There was always a mysterious barrier we could neither surmount nor understand. One reason that we loved alcohol so well is because it let us act extemporaneously, but eventually we were finally struck down by its effects, which left us in a terrified loneliness. When we reached AA for the first time in our lives, we stood among people who seemed to understand us. This sense of belonging was terribly exciting. We thought that the isolation problem had been solved. We soon discovered that while we weren't alone anymore in the social sense, we still suffered the odd pangs of anxious apartness. Until we had talked with complete candor of our conflicts and had listened to someone else do the same thing, we still didn't belong. Step 5 was the answer. It was the beginning of true kinship with our fellows and our concept of a power greater than ourselves. This vital step is also the means by which we begin to get the feeling that we could be forgiven, no matter what we had thought and done. Our step 4 moral inventory had persuaded us that all-around forgiveness was desirable, but it was only when we resolutely tackled step 5 that we inwardly knew that we'd be able to receive forgiveness and give it too. Another great dividend we may expect from confiding our defects to another human being is humility, which amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. The first practical move towards humility must consist of recognizing our deficiencies. No defect can be corrected unless we clearly see what it is, but we will have to do more than see. The objective look at ourselves that we achieved in step 4 was, after all, Only a look. All of us saw that we lacked honesty and tolerance, that we were beset at times by attacks of self-pity or delusion of personal grandeur. While this was a humiliating experience, it didn't necessarily mean that we had acquired much humility. Though now recognized, your defects are still there. Something has to be done about them, and you cannot wish or will them away by yourself. Let's face it, alcoholics are some of the world's greatest con artists. You couldn't live as a practicing alcoholic if you didn't learn how to lie, cheat, con, manipulate, steal, etc. Whatever was necessary to satisfy your desire for alcohol. And the person that you con the most is yourself. You may have thought that you couldn't live with yourself if you had to really see what was going on when you were drinking, but that's exactly what is called for here. When you decide who is to hear your story, waste no time in doing so. You have a written inventory and are prepared for a long talk. Pocket your pride and go to it. Illuminate every twist of character and every dark cranny of the past, resentment-wise, fear-wise, and behavior-wise. Begin your step 5 with the doctor's opinion. You learn that you cannot safely consume alcohol because your body is allergic to it. This allergy produces a physical craving and an obsession of mind so powerful that you can become delusional to the point where you will convince yourself that you can safely drink alcohol even though your body has proven repeatedly that it cannot. If you are thoroughly convinced that you are indeed an alcoholic, admit to your concept of a higher power, yourself, and another human being that this is undeniably true. If you are unable to do this, little else can come from continuing to work both this and the succeeding steps. When you say, I am an alcoholic, you are stating the exact nature of your powerlessness over a disease with which you were inherently born. Next, it's important to admit that it's impossible for you to manage this illness by yourself. In choosing to practice the AA program, you acknowledge that it is only with the help of a power greater than yourself that you will be able to remain sober from alcohol one day at a time. You have completed a fearless moral inventory in step 4 to the best of your current abilities. It is time to discover whether or not anything you wrote down is accurate. More realism and therefore more honesty about yourself are more great gains you will make under the influence of step 5. As you took inventory, you began to suspect how much trouble self-delusion had been causing you. The disease of alcoholism would have you believe falsehoods about your ability to safely drink. And these lies are at the root cause of your problems. This brought to mind a disturbing reflection. If all of your life you had more or less fooled yourself, how could you now be so sure that you weren't still self-deceived in crafting your step 4 inventory? How could you be certain that you had made a true catalog of your defects and had admitted to them even to yourself? Because you are still bothered by fear, sadness, and hurt feelings, it logically follows you can't appraise yourself fairly at all. Too much guilt or remorse might cause you to dramatize and exaggerate your shortcomings, or anger and hurt pride might be the smokescreen under which you hid some of your defects that you continue to blame on others. Possibly you are still handicapped by many liabilities, great and small, that you don't even yet know you have. Inventories are an important method in helping you to look inside your mind and find your flawed thinking processes. But can you also admit to your concept of God, yourself, and another human being that even your inventory can be an exercise in self-delusion if evaluated solely from your own point of view? Hence, isn't it self-evident that a solitary self-appraisal and the admission of your defects based upon that wouldn't nearly be enough? You'd have to have outside help if you were surely to know and admit the truth about yourself. Only by discussing yourself, holding back nothing, by being willing to take suggestions and accept direction, can you set foot on the road to straight thinking, solid honesty, and genuine humility. Until you actually sit down and talk aloud about what you have long hidden, your willingness to clean house is largely theoretical. What comes to you alone may be garbled by your own rationalizations and wishful thinking. The benefit of talking to another person is that you can get their direct comment and counsel on your situation. Going it alone in spiritual matters is dangerous. How many times have you heard about well-intentioned people that claimed the guidance of God when it was all too plain that they were sorely mistaken? Lacking both practice and humility, they had deluded themselves and were able to justify the most errant nonsense on the grounds that this was what God had told them. They believed in falsehoods of their own making, only to ultimately fall back into their old thinking patterns of resentment and self-pity. Bill W. told us that there exist three basic human instincts for survival: for the sex relation, for material and emotional security, and for companionship, and that they are perfectly necessary and right to the human condition. But pursued unwisely, they can powerfully, blindly, subtly drive us, dominate us, insist on ruling our lives, and that our desires to fulfill these instincts have often tyrannized us. When thus out of joint, nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct. And when this happens, our great natural assets, the instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. Step 4 was your vigorous and painstaking effort to discover how, when, and where your natural desires have warped you. You have freely admitted that you have had resentment towards others. You have acknowledged that you aren't upset with them personally, but for their behavior towards you. You have admitted and accepted the idea that resentment is the number one offender that destroys more alcoholics than anything else. You're believing that someone or something as the cause of your resentment is untrue, and by continuing to hold on to this view, it will eventually lead to self-resentment, which eventually turns into self-pity. The Big Book states that it is your unfulfilled expectations that are the source of your troubles. Expectations are premeditated resentments. You wish to be loved and celebrated for who you are, but can you accept and admit with kindness that the falsehood you believe about yourself are the source of your problems? The AA program teaches you how to use your resentments to develop the skill of soothing love towards yourself. Your old ways of thinking have helped you survive when they were the only choices that you knew. After listing them, try to be gentle, loving, and grateful towards each one for bringing you this far. Ask your own concept of a greater power to relieve you of the bondage of self, whereby you repeatedly obsess and beat yourself up for the past choices you have made. You simply admit to your own faulty thoughts and unhealthy behaviors that eventually led you to drink. These will be the basis for your doing steps 6 and 7. In sharing these hidden truths, provided you hold back nothing, your sense of relief will mount from minute to minute. Your fears fall from you. You may have certain spiritual beliefs, but now you begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that your drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. The dammed up emotions of years break out of their confinement and miraculously vanish as soon as they are exposed. As the pain subsides, a healing tranquility takes place. You will feel a new freedom and a new happiness. You will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. You will suddenly understand why all of your previous attempts to release your resentment with your mind, forcing yourself to be healthier spiritually, and using only your self-will, were exercises in futility. You can now accept the idea that a selfish, self-centered human being is always scared to death, and that you cannot solve your problems using the same mindset that created them. These revelations are emerging through the open and honest sharing of your terrible burden of guilt and shame with another human being under the guidance of your concept of a greater power. You will be amazed that you are practicing, maybe for the first time, the skill of treating yourself with soothing love as you would a sick friend. Always before you had looked to see what others had done to you. Now you can see what you did to yourself by holding on to resentments. The fifth step is your first attempt in the process whereby you can acknowledge in the presence of another person the insanity of your past behaviors caused by your suffering from a spiritual malady that made it impossible for you to successfully control your alcoholism because you weren't capable of looking at anything other than your own resentments. This isn't about rewriting history, but rather finding joy and meaning in the process of opening your heart. By admitting the exact nature of your wrongs, you can free yourself from the usual unhealthy habits that blocked you from the mindset and tools needed to find love for yourself. You no longer wish to be defined by your past indiscretions and failures, but instead be liberated through the unconditional love of your higher power. Forgiving yourself becomes easier as you begin to learn that your old shame-based beliefs aren't true. Whatever has happened in the past does not have to control what you choose to do today. In the process of admitting to yourself your concept of a power greater than yourself and another human being, you're asking for the humility and willingness to put aside the false and fixed ideas of who you believed yourself to be. Step 5 helps you to be free of the old thinking patterns that created the warped perspective of yourself that prevented you from having a sane wholeness and completeness of mind.